Have you ever sensed something was off about someone, like an invisible tension in the air, a quiet discomfort that you couldn't quite explain? Maybe it was the way they looked at you, or how the room seemed heavier when they entered. You couldn't put your finger on it, but deep down something felt wrong. Evil doesn't always appear wearing a mask or making threats. More often it arrives gently, smiling, helpful, even charming. It pretends to care, pretends to listen, and slowly starts draining your confidence, your peace, and even your sense of what's real. In Stoic philosophy, we are taught to protect our minds and remain anchored in truth and clarity. One of the greatest acts of wisdom is learning to recognize those who do us harm before they get too close, because evil rarely shows itself clearly until it's already too late. But here's the good news. Evil always leaves clues. It can't help but reveal itself if you know what to look for. There are specific signs, subtle red flags that expose someone's true nature, long before they destroy your peace. In this video, I'll walk through 7 powerful red flags that reveal when someone around you may be emotionally destructive, manipulative, and truly dangerous. If you learn to see these signs, you won't just avoid unnecessary pain, you'll reclaim your power and protect your inner peace. Before we begin, a quick favor. If you find value in this, hit that subscribe button. It's free and helps more people find these insights. And don't skip around. Every part of this video could change the way you see relationships. Let's begin. Red flag number 1. They constantly lie or twist the truth. What happens when someone you trust begins to bend reality? At first, the lies are small, easy to overlook. A harmless exaggeration here, a tiny contradiction there. But soon the patterns emerge. You start to realize that their version of events never quite lines up with your memory. And that subtle confusion you feel, it isn't accidental, it's intentional. Evil people don't just lie to cover mistakes. They lie because it gives them control. For them, truth is not a principle. It's a tool to be used or discarded depending on what benefits them most. They don't lie out of fear. They lie because they can. And more importantly, because it allows them to reshape the world around you. This is what makes their dishonesty so dangerous. It's not about one false story. It's about creating an environment where you no longer trust your own perception. One moment you're sure of something they said, and the next you're questioning your own memory. That's not coincidence. That's psychological warfare. A Stoic mind is built on clarity, reason, and self-trust. And when someone repeatedly distorts the truth, they aren't just breaking trust, they're sabotaging your foundation. Each manipulation chips away at your mental stability. You begin to second-guess yourself. Was I overreacting? Did I hear that wrong? Maybe I misunderstood? That's the trap. A truly malicious liar doesn't just want to deceive you, they want to make you feel like the problem. And once you doubt your reality, they can lead you anywhere they want. Picture this. You confront them about a contradiction, something they clearly said just days ago. Instead of owning up, they twist the moment. You're too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong. Why are you making a big deal out of nothing? Now you're not just hurt, you're confused. You might even apologize for bringing it up. That's how deeply the manipulation works. And over time, it doesn't just erode trust in them, it erodes trust in yourself. Ask yourself this. How many times has someone lied to you when telling the truth would have cost them nothing? That's the red flag. When there's no need to lie, no consequence, no conflict, and they still choose deception, it reveals something deeper. They lie because they enjoy the power it gives them. It's not about avoiding blame, it's about seeing what they can get away with. They test your boundaries not to understand you, but to find your breaking point. And every time you overlook it, they tighten their grip. A person who lives in truth doesn't fear being wrong. They embrace it as part of growth. But a person who twists truth doesn't want growth. They want domination. They want to create a world where their word is the only version of reality that matters. And when you push back, they act wounded, offended, even outraged. Why? Because they know that clarity is power, and clarity is what they fear most. From a Stoic perspective, truth is not just a moral preference. It's a survival tool. Epictetus reminds us, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That same principle applies here. When someone continually lies to you, it is your responsibility to step back, observe without emotion, and ask the hard questions. Are you constantly confused around them? Do you walk away from conversations feeling drained, uncertain, or even a little ashamed? That's not normal. That's not you being sensitive. That's a warning. There's no peace where lies live. There's no growth when reality is bent for someone else's comfort. If someone consistently chooses dishonesty, even when the stakes are low, they are telling you who they really are. And it's your job to believe them the first time, not the 10th, not after years of doubt, the first time. You don't have to play their game. You don't have to explain yourself endlessly or stay caught in their mental maze. When someone uses lies to control, confuse, or silence you, walk away. Your clarity, your peace of mind, your inner stability, they are too valuable to be handed over to someone who only seeks to unravel them. So, take a moment now. Reflect. Is there someone in your life who constantly leaves you questioning your memory, your feelings, or your truth? If so, don't brush it off as a minor flaw. That's not a quirk. That's a red flag. And the longer you ignore it, the more power they have over your thoughts, your emotions, and your reality. Trust your instincts. Trust your perception. Because an evil person will never hand you the truth. It's up to you to see it and protect yourself before the damage is done. Red flag number 2, they thrive on conflict and chaos. Have you ever noticed someone who always seems to be at the center of drama? Someone who can walk into a peaceful room and somehow turn it cold, tense, or explosive without raising their voice. These people don't just stumble into conflict, they cultivate it. While most people seek peace resolution, or at the very least respectful distance from tension, these individuals seem magnetically drawn to discord. But this isn't coincidence. It's by design. Some people feed on conflict because it gives them what they crave most: control, attention, and emotional dominance. To the Stoics, peace of mind is sacred. Marcus Aurelius taught that you have power over your mind, not outside events. But these conflict-driven personalities want the opposite for you. They want your inner world to be as unsettled as the chaos they stir up around you. And they will stop at nothing to break that calm. They don't simply react to tension, they orchestrate it. With a calculated word here, a subtle jab there, they quietly sow disharmony and watch it grow like a storm cloud over every interaction. Sometimes they stir conflict with carefully timed comments. Other times it's passive-aggressive remarks, sly insinuations, or exaggerated reactions to minor issues. You may find yourself wondering, why does everything feel heavier when they're around? That's not your imagination. These people inject instability into every space they enter, and they delight in the aftermath. Imagine a family gathering filled with laughter, warmth, and connection, until they casually bring up a sensitive topic or revive an old disagreement. Within minutes, what was a joyful occasion spirals into tension, confusion, and bitterness. And where are they? Standing back, watching it all unfold, often with a quiet smirk of satisfaction. They don't just enjoy the drama, they feel empowered by it. The truth is, they aren't trying to resolve anything. They're not seeking understanding or fairness, they're performing. Chaos is their stage, and your reaction is their applause. Every argument they spark, every divide they create, is a reminder that they still hold emotional power over those around them. And if you challenge them, they'll play innocent, claim you're overreacting, or insist they were simply being honest. Stoic wisdom teaches us that we can't control others, but we must control ourselves. These people test that discipline at every turn. Their chaos is designed to provoke you, to drain you, to lower your emotional defenses until you're just as reactive, angry, or insecure as they are. That's how they pull you into their storm. And once you're in it, they act like the victim, pretending they had no part in the destruction. Ask yourself this: are there people in your life who consistently turn harmony into friction, who somehow spark division between friends, co-workers, or family, yet always seem to escape accountability? That's not just immaturity or bad communication. That's a red flag, especially when you notice a pattern. Conflict follows them, clings to them, and multiplies around them. They might spread rumors under the guise of concern. They might manipulate conversations so that others begin to question each other's intentions. Sometimes they even pretend to mediate, to seem helpful, all while keeping the fire quietly burning in the background. This isn't just emotional immaturity, it's deliberate sabotage masked as involvement. And perhaps most dangerously, they have no empathy for the emotional wreckage they leave behind. They don't care who they hurt. They don't reflect. They don't apologize. Because deep down, your pain is their proof of influence. They know they've affected you, and that's enough for them to feel powerful. But here's where you reclaim your strength, by refusing to participate. by stepping away from the games, by protecting your peace like your life depends on it, because sometimes your mental life does. You are not obligated to entertain chaos just because someone else thrives in it. You have the right to choose stability over stress, distance over drama, growth over games. If someone in your life constantly draws you into arguments, creates tension where there was none, or seems happiest when others are upset, pay attention. That's not random. That's not a coincidence. That's a warning. And the Stoics would tell you this: you cannot be free while someone else controls your peace. So don't hand them that power. Guard your inner calm as if it were gold, because it is. Walk away if you must. Set boundaries without apology. And above all, remember, peace is a choice, and so is the company you keep. Red flag number 3. They make you feel like you're always at fault. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling guilty even though you did nothing wrong? Have you ever found yourself apologizing just to keep the peace even when you were the one who was hurt? This is no accident. This is one of the most dangerous games an evil person plays. The subtle, constant shifting of blame until you begin to believe that everything is your fault. And once you start accepting blame that isn't yours, they've already begun to control you. Evil doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like quiet psychological pressure. The kind that makes you question your memory, your emotions, your entire sense of self. These people don't raise their voice. They raise your doubt. They chip away at your confidence until their voice becomes louder in your mind than your own. And the most insidious part? They do it without ever appearing openly aggressive. They convince you that you're the problem, that your emotions are irrational, that your memory is flawed, that your perspective is broken. This is gaslighting, a psychological tactic designed to undermine your trust in your own mind. And the more it happens, the more you feel unsure of yourself. At first you may push back. No, I remember that conversation. That's not what I said. But over time, the repeated denial wears you down. You begin to hesitate before speaking up. You start to double-check your own words. You even apologize for how you made them feel, as if their emotions are your responsibility. But here's the truth. No one who loves you, respects you, or sees you as an equal will make you feel like a burden for having feelings. A person who truly cares about you wants clarity, not control. They may disagree with you, but they'll still hear you. They'll seek to understand, not overpower. An evil person, however, will twist everything, your words, your tone, your memory, until they've rewritten reality in their favor. Marcus Aurelius taught that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you spend enough time around someone who blames you for everything, soon your mind begins to absorb that color. You start thinking in terms of guilt, shame, and self-doubt. Your soul becomes dyed with their narrative, and you begin to believe the lies they tell about you. That is why this red flag is so critical to recognize. Because once your self-belief is gone, it's far harder to escape. Imagine being in a disagreement where you know you're right. You remember exactly what happened, but the other person insists it never occurred, or that you're being too sensitive. You replay it over and over in your head, trying to make sense of their version. Suddenly, you're not arguing about what happened. You're trying to prove your own sanity. That's the trap, and it's how they win. The Stoics believed in rational thought and clarity. Epictetus taught that we should distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Your thoughts, your perceptions, and your values are within your control. But someone who constantly blames you for their emotions or actions is trying to seize that control for themselves. They want you to internalize their chaos, their dysfunction, and carry it as your own. So ask yourself, are you always the one apologizing? Do you feel like no matter what happens, it's always your fault in their eyes? Do your feelings get dismissed or twisted into an accusation against you? If the answer is yes, then stop and pay attention. That's not miscommunication, that's manipulation. That's a red flag waving in plain sight. And here's what you must remember. You are not too sensitive for having emotions. You are not wrong for remembering things differently. You are not a villain because you asked for respect. You do not owe your mental peace to someone who tramples it to feel powerful. You have the right to trust your instincts, to speak your truth, and to protect your mind. Don't let anyone shrink your sense of self just because they're too afraid to confront their own flaws. A person who never owns their mistakes will always look for someone else to carry the blame, and if you let them, they will use your compassion against you. But you can break that pattern. You can step back. You can reclaim your inner clarity and decide, from this moment on, to stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you. Because in the end, the person who constantly makes you feel like you're always at fault isn't looking for peace. They're looking for control. And the Stoic path is not one of submission to lies. It's a path of strength, awareness, and freedom. Guard your mind, trust your reality, and when necessary, walk away. Red flag number 4. They always play the victim. Have you ever met someone who always seems to be the one who's hurt, misunderstood, or mistreated, no matter the situation? No matter what goes wrong, they find a way to make it about how they've been wronged. You could confront them with clear facts, undeniable behavior, or real harm they've caused, and yet somehow by the end of the conversation, you're the one apologizing. This is not self-awareness or emotional vulnerability. This is a calculated strategy. Because one of the most deceptive red flags is the person who constantly plays the victim. At first it may seem like they're just wounded, struggling, or emotionally overwhelmed. You feel for them. You empathize. You give them space, comfort, and forgiveness. After all, life is hard and we all have our moments. But with this kind of person, the pattern never changes. They never grow. They never take ownership. And they never admit fault. Why? Because pretending to be the victim is their shield and their weapon. Stoic philosophy teaches us to take full responsibility for our actions and our responses. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." A virtuous person faces challenges with humility, learns from setbacks, and accepts accountability. But an evil person weaponizes victimhood to avoid any form of self-reflection. To them, life isn't something to learn from, it's something to blame. These people don't just see themselves as victims, they need to be seen that way by others. It's how they manipulate sympathy, how they dodge criticism, and how they control those around them. And if you dare to question their version of events, you become the villain in their story. The moment you set a boundary or bring up a real issue, they collapse into their victim role. How could you say that to me? You don't understand everything I've been through. You're the one being cruel. And suddenly, you're no longer discussing the harm they caused. You're defending yourself against a false accusation. This emotional reversal is no accident. It's a tactic designed to trap you in guilt, to make you abandon your needs in favor of their constant emotional crisis. And the longer you stay in this dynamic, the more exhausted, confused, and manipulated you become. Ask yourself, do you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells around them? Like you can't express a single concern without it being flipped back on you? Do they always seem to have a sob story ready to explain away their behavior, yet never make an effort to change? That's not vulnerability. That's manipulation. And it's one of the most toxic red flags there is. Because here's what truly makes this dangerous. You start to believe it. You start to internalize their narrative. That maybe you are being too harsh, too cold, too demanding. And once you buy into that illusion, they have you exactly where they want you, emotionally indebted, constantly overcompensating, and stuck in a cycle of emotional servitude. But the Stoics would remind you, you are not responsible for someone else's refusal to grow. Compassion does not mean self-sacrifice. Helping someone should not come at the cost of your peace or your truth. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Don't suffer under the weight of someone else's lies disguised as pain. If their victimhood never ends, it's not a phase. It's a strategy. And it's not just emotionally draining, it's deeply disempowering. Because when you constantly excuse someone else's behavior in the name of their suffering, you train yourself to accept dysfunction. You silence your own needs. You carry their emotional baggage at the expense of your own clarity. And worst of all, you become afraid to speak up. Because every time you do, they make you feel like the bad guy. Here's the truth. Empathy should never be used against you. Emotional support should not be transactional. And someone who weaponizes their past to control your present is not healing. They're hiding. If they refuse to take responsibility, if they blame the world but never look in the mirror, if they twist every boundary into an attack, they are showing you exactly who they are. And you have every right to step back, to protect your mental space, to stop explaining yourself, to stop rescuing someone who doesn't want to be rescued, just obeyed. You deserve peace, clarity, and relationships where growth is mutual, not manipulated. So ask yourself, are you constantly making excuses for their behavior? Do you feel guilty for prioritizing your own well-being? Are you being emotionally held hostage by someone who never takes responsibility for their actions? If so, it's time to stop playing the role they've written for you and walk away from the script entirely. Because the person who always plays the victim isn't helpless. They're dangerous. And the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to carry the weight of their false narrative. Stand tall. See clearly. And choose freedom over false guilt. Red flag number 5. They constantly criticize you but never acknowledge your success. There's a kind of emotional poison that doesn't strike suddenly. It seeps in slowly. It doesn't come with shouting or open cruelty. It arrives in the form of constant, subtle criticism. It's the voice that always points out what you didn't do, what you could have done better, or why your effort still wasn't quite enough. And over time, it begins to echo inside your mind until you start hearing it even when they're not around. One of the most dangerous red flags is the person who always sees your flaws but never your growth. They downplay your wins, shift the goalposts every time you improve, and seem irritated when you're proud of yourself. They don't build, they break. Not with violence, but with quiet, relentless erosion. Imagine working hard on a goal, something that stretched your limits and required courage. You finally get there. You succeed. You want to share it with someone close, and instead of pride or support, you get indifference, sarcasm, or even a comparison to make you feel small. That's cool, but it's not that impressive. Or worse, well, I've done more. This isn't feedback. This is sabotage, disguised as realism. It's not meant to help, it's meant to hurt. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what's within our control, our thoughts, our choices, and our character. But a person like this wants to rob you of that control. They want your self-worth to hinge on their approval they will never give. And when you rely on someone who withholds recognition and only offers criticism, you begin to live in a cycle of emotional starvation. You keep trying, keep striving, hoping that maybe this time they'll say, "I'm proud of you." But they never do. Why? Because your growth threatens them. Every step you take forward reminds them of their own stagnation. Your confidence is a mirror to their insecurity. So instead of celebrating you, they try to shrink you. They plant seeds of self-doubt. You're not as smart as you think. That wasn't really a big deal. Anyone could have done that. Over time, those seeds take root, and soon you start questioning your accomplishments, second-guessing your instincts, and wondering if you're just not good enough. This is not humility, this is emotional manipulation. True humility, as the Stoics understood, is about recognizing our limitations while honoring our efforts. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." You've faced adversity. You've grown. You've earned your progress, and yet someone who constantly tears you down isn't testing your humility. They're attacking your self-respect. Ask yourself, do you feel smaller after sharing your victories with this person? Do they always find a flaw, a missing piece, a reason why it still doesn't count? Do they only offer validation when you're failing, but never when you rise? That's not balance. That's resentment. And it's a red flag you must take seriously. The worst part? They often disguise it as tough love or honesty. But love without encouragement is not love, and honesty without compassion is cruelty. You are not weak for wanting to be seen. You are not needy for wanting someone to acknowledge your effort. You're human. And in healthy relationships, people lift each other. They celebrate each other's progress. They don't use your vulnerabilities as opportunities to assert their superiority. This kind of criticism is especially dangerous because it doesn't just come from outside. It begins to internalize. You start measuring your worth by how much they approve of you, even when that approval never comes. And slowly your self-esteem becomes tied to a standard you can never meet, because the goal is not to help you improve, but to keep you uncertain. But the Stoics remind us, your worth is not measured by someone else's opinion. It is measured by your actions, your values, and your resilience. You do not need applause to be worthy. You do not need permission to be proud of who you are becoming. So if someone in your life constantly criticizes but never celebrates you, step back and ask, what do they gain from my insecurity? And what am I losing by keeping them close? Because no one has the right to make you feel unworthy of your own growth. You have come too far to let someone else's bitterness become the lens through which you see yourself. You have the right to honor your progress, to acknowledge your own success, and to walk away from anyone who only sees you as a threat to their ego. Protect your peace, guard your growth, And never let someone's silence about your worth convince you that you have none. Red flag number 6. They show no empathy or compassion. One of the clearest signs that someone may be deeply toxic, if not truly dangerous, is not how they treat you when things are going well, but how they react when you're hurting, when life knocks you down, when your heart is heavy or your soul feels bruised. Their reaction reveals everything. Some people offer support, presence, or at the very least, sincere silence, but others offer nothing, not because they're overwhelmed, but because they simply don't care. This is one of the most chilling red flags, the absence of empathy. The complete inability or refusal to recognize your pain as real or important. These people don't just fail to comfort you. They seem to look right through your suffering as if your emotions are an inconvenience or an annoyance. And when they do respond, it's often cold, detached, or worse, dismissive. You're being dramatic. Life is hard for everyone. Get over it. They don't say these things out of blunt honesty. They say them because they're empty inside and they want you to feel the same. Stoicism teaches us to endure hardship with strength and to master our emotions, but it never tells us to deny our humanity. The Stoics believed in compassion, not weakness, but shared understanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly, but I have seen the beauty of good, and I will not be harmed." Empathy is not a weakness. It's a strength that evil people don't possess. Now imagine going through a loss, a death in the family, the end of a relationship, a major failure, and you reach out to someone hoping for just a bit of understanding. Instead, you're met with indifference. They don't offer comfort, they barely acknowledge it, or they change the subject to themselves. In that moment, their emotional emptiness becomes undeniable, and it cuts deeper than silence. It feels like abandonment. People without empathy see others not as people, but as tools. You are either useful to them or irrelevant. When you're thriving, they may tolerate you. But when you're in pain and need something they can't use, your time, your vulnerability, your need for care, they detach completely. Why? Because empathy requires presence, it requires emotional effort, and they have none to give. Worse, they may use your pain as a weapon. They might mock it, twist it, or exploit it when it's convenient. Your vulnerability becomes their leverage. Your grief becomes a punchline. Your struggle becomes something they remind you of, not to help you, but to keep you small. And over time, this lack of compassion doesn't just hurt you, it begins to change you. You start to withdraw. You stop sharing. You begin to believe your feelings are a burden, your emotions are weakness, and your struggles should be hidden. That's how their emotional void becomes your internal silence. You don't just lose support, you lose your voice. Ask yourself, do you feel emotionally invisible around them? Have you ever been in deep pain only to be met with distance or even ridicule? Do you hesitate to share your struggles because you know you'll be met with judgment instead of care? That's not just emotional immaturity, that's a warning sign. That's someone who lacks the most basic quality that makes human connection possible, empathy, and the danger runs deep. Because a person who doesn't care about your pain will never hesitate to cause it. If they feel nothing when you're suffering, there is nothing stopping them from inflicting more suffering. And if you try to hold them accountable, they won't understand. They won't reflect. They'll deny, deflect, or blame you for being too emotional. But here's what the Stoics would remind you. Your inner peace is yours to guard. Your emotions matter, not because they should control you, but because they are signals of what's right and wrong in your environment. When someone repeatedly shows you that your pain doesn't matter to them, they are showing you who they are. And you must believe them the first time. You are not weak for needing empathy. You are not wrong for wanting someone to care. And you are not invisible even if someone chooses to treat you that way. The absence of empathy is not just a flaw, it is a clear boundary you must respect. Because continuing to seek comfort from someone who has none to give will only drain you further. Protect your heart, honor your feelings, and never waste your energy trying to find warmth in someone who has chosen coldness as their way of life. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be supported. And when that support is nowhere to be found, your courage must carry you out of that relationship. Empathy is not optional. It is the soul of connection. And when it's missing, completely missing, you're not safe. Walk away before their emptiness starts to hollow out your light. Red flag number 7. They subtly isolate you from others. Sometimes evil doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And one of the most dangerous tactics a truly manipulative person uses isn't to attack you directly, but to slowly cut the strings that connect you to others. They isolate you, not by locking you in a room, but by gradually distancing you from your support system, your friends, your family, even your own sense of community. And they do it in ways so quiet, so seemingly innocent, that you don't even realize it's happening until you're standing alone. This is the final red flag, and one of the most difficult to recognize. Because it doesn't start with obvious control. It begins with concern. I don't think your friends really understand you. Your family doesn't support you like I do. That person you talk to so much, they're jealous of you. At first, these comments feel protective, even caring. You might believe they're just looking out for you. But over time, those comments accumulate. The calls to your friend group become less frequent. Your visits to family grow shorter. You start relying on this one person more and more, for advice, for approval, for connection. And that's the goal. A person who seeks to isolate you isn't doing it because they love you. They're doing it because they want to own you. The more alone you become, the more dependent you are on them. And once your world shrinks to just them, they have total control. If they can cut you off from outside voices, they become the only voice that matters. And that's when the manipulation becomes complete. Stoic philosophy teaches us to cultivate independence of thought. Marcus Aurelius advised us to stand up straight, not straightened. A Stoic doesn't lean on others for validation, but they also don't tolerate someone who tries to sever all connections in order to dominate. A virtuous person respects your freedom. A toxic one will try to replace it with dependence. You may not notice this isolation at first. It creeps in slowly. One day you're skipping a gathering because they didn't really invite you properly. The next, you're declining a call from your best friend because they just always bring negativity. Except that friend never did. You're just repeating what you've been told. The filter has been planted, and before long it becomes your new lens on reality. Ask yourself, are you spending less time with the people who once mattered most? Have you begun to feel guilty or anxious about interacting with certain friends or family members? Do you find yourself second-guessing long-standing relationships because of what this person has said? These aren't signs of personal growth. They're signs of psychological isolation. And here's where it becomes even more twisted. When they succeed in isolating you, they don't give you more love, they give you more criticism. Now that you have no emotional backup, they can push harder, take more, and show less. And when you feel lonely or overwhelmed, they blame you for it. You're the one who pushed everyone away. No acknowledgement that they helped orchestrate it from the beginning. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, and part of human nature is community. We are meant to connect, to build bonds, to share our lives with others. Someone who tries to rob you of that isn't protecting you. They are dismantling your identity, one relationship at a time. You are not meant to shrink to fit into someone else's world. You are not meant to walk through life with one voice in your ear and every other silenced. Real love, real friendship, real connection. These things encourage your growth, not your isolation. They expand your world. They don't shrink it. So if someone in your life constantly questions your other relationships, tries to limit who you see, or subtly poisons your trust in everyone but them, recognize this for what it is. This is not love. This is not safety. This is control. And it's time to reclaim your freedom. Rebuild the bridges they told you to burn. Reach out to the people they made you doubt. Reclaim your space, your voice, your right to connect, because isolation is where they win. But connection, true, honest connection, is where you begin to heal. And as the Stoics would remind us, your peace is not something others are allowed to gatekeep. It is yours to protect. Surround yourself with people who lift you up, not lock you in. The person who truly cares about you will never ask you to stand alone. They'll stand beside you and never make you feel like your world has to get smaller to keep their love. Seeing these red flags isn't always easy, especially when they come from someone you care about, but recognizing them can protect you from years of emotional confusion and pain. Evil doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It hides behind fake concern, quiet criticism, and manipulative charm. But once you learn to spot the signs, you take your power back. Stoicism teaches us to see clearly, to guard our peace, and to choose our circle wisely. You don't need to explain yourself to someone who constantly drains you. You don't have to stay where your worth is questioned and your growth is feared. So ask yourself, who brings calm to your life and who brings chaos? Who celebrates your strength and who tries to silence it? If this video helped you see something more clearly, take a moment to subscribe. It's free and helps others find this message too. And if you've faced someone like this, share your story in the comments. You never know who needs your words today. Until next time, protect your energy, trust your instincts, and never forget, you deserve peace.